The sun was just rising over Krylos. 7. Casting long shadows across the jagged landscape of abandoned mines and rusting machinery. The wind carried a dry, metallic taste, and the ground was littered with debris from decades of neglect. Captain Mara Voss walked carefully among the ruins, her boots crunching over broken metal and dust. She had been sent to this desolate planet to survey it for potential mining operations, but what she found was something she had not expected. As she rounded a collapsed wall of what used to be a worker's dormitory, she saw a small figure huddled in the shadows. At first she thought it might be a stray animal, but then she noticed the faint outline of an adult and a child. The adult was a female alien, her skin pale and sickly, her limbs thin and frail. Beside her, a tiny child clung to her, trembling. Both were covered in dirt and old rags, and their eyes were wide with fear and desperation. Mara froze for a moment, unsure what to do. She had heard stories of the Alithians, an intelligent species known for their labor and resource skills, often exploited and enslaved by powerful corporations. But to see one abandoned like this, weak and helpless, made her stomach turn. The woman looked at Mara, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear, silently pleading for help. The child let out a small, frightened cry. From the distance, Mara noticed movement. Alien patrols passed by, scanning the ruins with mechanical precision. These patrols had seen the woman and child before, but they ignored them, moving on without a word or glance. The Alithians were considered expendable, their lives unimportant to the larger galaxy. Mara felt a surge of anger and frustration. How could anyone pass by and do nothing? How could a society let a mother and child suffer simply because it was convenient to ignore them? She took a deep breath and stepped forward, ignoring the warnings ringing in her mind. Her team had orders to avoid conflict, to maintain neutrality. But seeing the woman's thin arms wrap protectively around the child, Mara could not turn away. She called out softly, "Careful not to startle them." "Hey." "It's okay, we're here to help," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. The woman flinched, her eyes darting around nervously. She whispered something in her native tongue, a language Mara didn't understand, but the tone was clear. She didn't trust them. The child buried his face in the woman's shoulder, whimpering softly. Mara crouched down to appear less threatening, keeping her hands visible. "We're not going to hurt you," she said. "We just want to help. Do you have food? Water?" The woman shook her head weakly, and Mara realized how serious the situation was. They were starving, and the harsh environment of Krylos, 7 would have made survival nearly impossible for anyone, let alone a mother and child alone. Mara's heart ached as she thought of her own younger siblings and the children she had met in her travels. The thought of leaving them here to die was unbearable. Her team gathered behind her, watching silently. Some of them looked worried, glancing at their scanners and comm devices, wondering about protocol. Others seemed uncomfortable, unsure whether helping these abandoned aliens was worth the risk. Mara turned to them and shook her head. "This isn't about rules or regulations. This is about life," she said firmly. "If we don't help them, who will?" With careful movements, she offered a small ration pack and a bottle of water. The woman's eyes widened at the gesture, and after a moment of hesitation, she took the food. The child reached out with trembling hands, and Mara placed a portion into his tiny palms. They ate slowly, clearly unfamiliar with kindness and care. Mara watched them, a sense of determination growing stronger in her chest. She knew this would not be easy. The galaxy did not reward compassion, especially when it conflicted with laws, politics, or corporate interests. Helping runaway slaves could bring trouble, fines, or even conflict with powerful entities. But Mara also knew that some things were more important than rules: humanity, morality, and the courage to act when no one else would. As the day progressed, Mara's team set up a temporary shelter in the ruins, using their portable equipment to create a safe space. They filtered water, provided more food, and even managed to stabilize the woman, who introduced herself as Sarai. The child's name was Lyric, Mara listened carefully as Sarai told them what had happened, her voice weak but filled with sorrow. She had been taken from her home planet, forced to work for a corporation that exploited her species. When she became too weak to work, they abandoned her on Krylos 7, leaving her and her child to die alone. Mara felt a deep sense of injustice. How could an entire galaxy allow such cruelty to happen? She glanced at her crew who were quietly helping, and realized that even in a world that often ignored suffering, humans still had the capacity to act with courage and compassion. But danger was never far away. Sensors detected movement on the outskirts of the ruins, corporate drones sent to check on the abandoned workers, or perhaps to reclaim them. Mara knew they had to be careful. She ordered her team to camouflage the shelter and use diversion tactics if needed. Every moment counted, and every decision could mean life or death for Sarai and Lyric. As night fell on Krylos 7, the wind howled through the broken walls, and the stars above seemed distant and cold. Sarai sat quietly beside her child, holding him close, while Mara watched over them from a short distance. For the first time in what seemed like forever, Sarai allowed herself a small measure of relief, trusting these humans to help them survive. Mara knew this was only the beginning. The journey ahead would be difficult, full of obstacles and fraught with danger. But she also knew that some truths were universal: the value of life, the strength of empathy, and the courage to act when the world looked the other way. And as she looked at Sarai and Lyric, fragile but alive, she made a silent promise to protect them, no matter the cost. In that desolate, abandoned place, a small spark of hope was born. Humanity, flawed but capable of extraordinary compassion, had chosen to intervene where the rest of the galaxy had failed. And for Sarai and Lyric, that choice might mean the difference between death and a future filled with possibility. Mara and her team spent the rest of the night planning their next steps. They needed to get off Krylos 7 safely, avoid patrols, and find a place where Sarai and Lyric could recover fully. It would not be easy, and the galaxy would not necessarily welcome them. But Mara had faith in one thing. Humans had a stubborn, unyielding ability to fight for what was right, even when no one else would. As dawn approached, the first rays of light illuminated the barren wasteland. The shadows that once seemed so oppressive now appeared softer, filled with the faint promise of a new day. Sarai held Lyric close, and for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. Mara looked at them and felt the same. Somewhere in the vast expanse of the galaxy, compassion had taken root, and nothing, not fear, not rules, not indifference, could erase it. Mara's voice broke the silence. "We're going to get you both out of here. I promise." Sarai nodded weakly, tears glistening in her eyes. Lyric reached out and held Mara's hand. In that small gesture, a connection was formed, not just between humans and aliens, but between beings who understood that life, courage, and compassion mattered more than anything else in the universe. The journey ahead was uncertain, dangerous, and full of challenges. But in that moment, among the ruins of a forgotten planet, hope had won its first battle. And Mara knew, with unwavering certainty, that humanity had a role to play in changing the galaxy, one life at a time. The morning sun burned brighter over Krylos 7, and the ruins that had seemed so hostile the day before now looked like a fragile sanctuary. Mara's team worked quickly to prepare Sarai and Lyric for what lay ahead. They had survived the first night, but survival alone would not be enough. The planet was unforgiving, and danger was never far away. Sarai's body was weak, and her movements were slow. Lyric clung to her constantly, his small arms wrapped tightly around her neck. Mara could see the exhaustion in their eyes, the kind that only comes from days of hunger, fear, and abandonment. She knew that the first step was ensuring they could eat, breathe, and regain strength. The ration packs provided temporary relief, but it would take time for them to recover fully. "We need to get them somewhere safer," Mara said to her team. Krylos, 7, is no longer a place to hide. Drones, patrols, eventually, someone will notice them. Her team nodded. Lieutenant Kale, the ship's engineer, frowned. But if we move them, we risk being spotted, and the corporate recovery squads won't hesitate to take them back. Mara shook her head firmly. I know, but leaving them here is not an option. Humanity isn't about following rules blindly. It's about doing what's right, even when it's dangerous. With that decision made, the team prepared the transport modules. Sarai and Lyric were carefully secured in protective harnesses. Mara stayed close to Sarai, offering her reassurance in soft tones. You're safe with us. I won't let anything happen to you or Lyric. The woman's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Lyric looked at Mara with curiosity and cautious trust, holding her hand tightly as the modules lifted off the ground. The wind swept across the barren landscape, carrying dust and debris, and Mara watched Krylos, 7, shrink below them. It felt as though they were leaving behind, not just a planet, but a life of suffering, fear, and abandonment. The journey through space was tense. Mara's crew monitored the sensors constantly, scanning for patrols, pirates, and corporate interceptors. Every blip on the radar made hearts race. Mara had led rescue missions before, but never for something as fragile and precious as a mother and child. The stakes felt higher, almost unbearable. As hours passed, Sarai slowly opened up. Her voice was quiet, but steady. They took us from our home. Forced us to work. I thought we were nothing, just tools to them. She shivered, hugging Lyric closer. And then, they left us here, alone. To die. She had heard stories of cruelty in the galaxy, but seeing the impact on a living being, watching it in her eyes, was different. You're not nothing, she said softly. You are alive, and you matter. Lyric matters. That's why we are here. The child shifted slightly, his small fingers brushing Mara's. It was a small gesture, but it carried weight. A silent acknowledgement that trust could be built, even in the most desperate circumstances. Mara smiled gently. We're going to get you somewhere safe, somewhere you can heal. But the journey would not be simple. Space was full of dangers, and Krylos, 7, was only the first obstacle. As they passed through the outskirts of a nearby asteroid field, Mara detected movement on the scanners. Pirates? Kale muttered, and they're fast. Mara's hands gripped the control panel. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Keep Sarai and Lyric safe at all costs. The small transport ship weaved between asteroids, dodging laser fire and debris. Mara's crew worked in perfect coordination, using every trick in their arsenal to outmaneuver the pirates. Sarai clutched Lyric, her arms trembling, while the child hid his face against her shoulder. Despite the chaos, Mara remained calm, her voice steady as she gave commands. Focus. We've trained for situations like this. We will get through it. Minutes felt like hours, but finally the pirates gave up the chase. The ship floated silently in the void, drifting away from danger. Mara exhaled, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. Sarai looked at her, eyes wide with gratitude. You saved us, she whispered. No, Mara replied. You saved yourselves. We just helped. The next day, they entered a remote sector, far from corporate territories. Here, Mara hoped to find supplies and perhaps a place where Sarai and Lyric could rest properly. The humans landed on a small, uninhabited moon with a breathable atmosphere. It was barren, rocky, and harsh, but it was quiet, a chance to regroup. The crew set up temporary shelters, filtering water and providing food. Sarai and Lyric were given medical attention, and slowly they began to recover. The child's cheeks regained a faint color, and the mother's posture straightened as strength returned. Mara watched them with a sense of accomplishment and relief. But the respite was short-lived. As they repaired the transport ship, Mara's sensors detected incoming ships.
Corporate recovery drones. They were tracking the escapees.
Mara's jaw tightened. We need to move fast. If they reach us, Sarai and Lyric will be taken again. We can't let that happen. The team worked feverishly to prepare the ship for immediate departure. Mara devised a plan, using the moon's terrain to hide from the drones. We'll use the asteroid belts and the gravitational pull of nearby planets to mask our signals, she explained. They won't see us until we are gone. Sarai watched the preparations with a mixture of fear and hope. Why? Why are you doing this for us? She asked quietly. Mara paused, thinking about how to explain. Because it's the right thing to do. Because no one should be abandoned to die, no matter what the galaxy says. That's what humans believe. We act when others refuse. The woman nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. Lyric reached out and held Mara's hand again, a silent connection that filled the human captain with resolve. As the drones approached, Mara executed her plan. The transport ship slipped into an asteroid belt, using the shadows and debris to evade detection. The drones scanned, fired, and tried to follow, but Mara's calculations were precise. Each maneuver pushed them further from danger. By the time the drones realized they had been fooled, the humans were already several light minutes away, safe for the moment. The night in space was quiet, except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Mara sat with Sarai and Lyric, watching the stars stretch endlessly before them. We're not safe yet, she said softly. But we're moving in the right direction. You are no longer alone. You will survive. Sarai leaned back, exhaustion evident in every line of her face. But for the first time, she smiled faintly. Lyric's eyes sparkled with curiosity, looking at the stars outside the viewport. I want to see home again someday, he said quietly.
You will?
Mara replied. And when that day comes, you'll know that there are people in the galaxy who care, who will stand up when everyone else turns away. As the ship continued its journey, Mara thought about the galaxy they were moving through. A galaxy filled with indifference, greed, and cruelty. But she also thought about the humans aboard her ship, who had risked everything to protect two vulnerable lives. She felt a surge of pride. Humanity's strength was not just in technology or weapons. It was in their courage, their compassion, their ability to act when others refused. For Sarai and Lyric, the journey had only just begun. They had survived abandonment, hunger, and danger. But there were more trials ahead. Mara was determined to guide them through each challenge, teaching them to trust, to heal, and to believe that life could be more than just survival. As the first rays of a distant sun lit the ship's interior, Mara reflected on the choices that had brought them here. She knew there would be more obstacles. Pirates, corporate enforcers, and the vast uncertainties of space. But she also knew that together they could face them. Sarai and Lyric were no longer helpless. They had allies, and they had hope. And sometimes, Mara thought, that was enough to change everything. In the quiet moments, when Lyric slept in Sarai's arms and the stars stretched endlessly outside, Mara allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. She had acted when others would not. She had chosen compassion over indifference, and in that choice she had begun to write a new story, not just for Sarai and Lyric, but for the galaxy itself. Even in a universe filled with cruelty, there was still a place for kindness. There was still a place for courage. There was still a place for humanity. And Mara knew that this was only the beginning. The transport ship hummed softly as it glided through the darkness of space, the stars stretching endlessly in every direction. Mara sat at the helm, eyes scanning the sensors for any signs of danger. Sarai and Lyric rested in the rear of the ship, finally able to sleep without fear for a few precious hours. Mara's crew moved quietly, each of them alert yet calm, aware that the galaxy outside their vessel was a place full of threats and indifference. For Mara, this journey was no longer just about survival. It was about proving that even in a universe filled with cruelty, there were choices that could save lives and give hope. She glanced at Sarai through the small viewport separating the cabin from the living quarters. The woman had begun to regain some color in her cheeks, her eyes brighter than before. Lyric had stopped trembling and now clung to his mother with a sense of safety, a stark contrast to the fear-filled child she had first found on Kralos. 7. But Mara knew this fragile sense of peace would not last. Space was vast, yes, but so were the enemies who sought to exploit, control, and reclaim those like Sarai. The human captain tightened her grip on the controls as the sensors pinged. A small fleet of fast-moving vessels appeared on the outskirts of their radar, their formation precise. Corporate interceptors. The drones had regrouped after the failed pursuit near Krylos. 7, and they were relentless. "Brace yourselves," Mara said, her voice calm but firm. "They're coming for us." Her crew sprang into action. The transport ship wasn't designed for battle. But Mara was skilled in improvisation. She altered their trajectory, weaving through asteroid fields, using gravitational pulls to mask their approach. The enemy fired, and the laser blasts streaked past the hull with sparks and fire. But Mara's calculations were precise. They dodged each strike with a combination of technology, instinct, and daring. Sarai held Lyric close, whispering soothing words as Mara maneuvered the ship. "It's okay, Lyric. We're safe. Humans are helping us." The child peeked at Mara from his mother's shoulder, eyes wide, but curious. Are they going to catch us?" he asked softly. Mara shook her head. "Not if I can help it. We're smarter than they expect." As the pursuit continued, the crew worked in perfect coordination. Lieutenant Kale and the navigator Rin adjusted the ship's shields and rerouted power to the engines for sudden bursts of speed. Mara smiled faintly, pride mixing with tension. Her crew had adapted quickly, proving once again that human ingenuity often surpassed expectations. Hours passed in a tense blur. The interceptors had speed, firepower, and advanced tracking systems, but Mara had strategy. She led the enemy into a dense asteroid belt, where the chaotic movement of debris would make targeting nearly impossible. With every maneuver, she kept Sarai and Lyric safe, guiding them through the narrow gaps between enormous rocks with precision born of countless simulations and experience. Finally, the last interceptor fired, narrowly missing the ship. Before giving up the chase, Mara allowed herself a small exhale of relief. "They won't follow us here," she said, "not without risking their own fleet." Sarai leaned back, her body trembling from exhaustion. You really are humans," she said, awe in her voice. "You don't just fight. You care, even when no one else does." Mara smiled faintly. "That's who we are. It doesn't always make us safe or perfect, but we act. We help. That's what matters." The days that followed were tense, but calmer. Mara planned a route through uncharted sectors, avoiding populated systems where corporate or pirate patrols might spot them. She taught Sarai and Lyric basic survival skills for life aboard the ship, while her crew repaired systems damaged during the chase. The child was fascinated by everything: the hum of the engines, the blinking lights on the consoles, and the way Mara could make the ship move through impossible paths. One night, as the ship drifted past a luminous nebula, Sarai spoke quietly to Mara. I never imagined anyone would help us. Back home, no one did. And then you came. You risked everything." Her voice trembled, but her eyes shone with something Mara recognized: hope. "We didn't do it alone," Mara said gently. "You survived. Lyric survived. That's the first step. Humanity just made sure you got the chance to live." "Lyric, curled up beside his mother, spoke softly, almost to himself. "I like humans. You help everyone." Mara felt a lump in her throat. She had never thought much about the weight of her actions beyond the immediate moment, but hearing these words reminded her why she continued to risk so much. In a galaxy of indifference, humans could make a difference. And sometimes, that difference meant everything. Their next challenge came sooner than expected. While navigating a remote sector, Mara detected a derelict space station drifting silently among the stars. It was old, abandoned, and unstable, but sensors indicated faint energy readings, possibly supplies or functioning systems that could aid their journey. Mara decided to investigate, hoping to find medical equipment or provisions for Sarai and Lyric. As they docked carefully with the station, the crew noted its instability. Panels were loose, hull breaches leaking into space, and the structure groaned under its own weight. Mara led the team cautiously, scanning for hazards. Sarai and Lyric remained safely in the ship, while Mara, Kale, and Rin explored the station. Suddenly, a section of the ceiling collapsed, sending debris crashing toward them. Mara reacted instinctively, pulling Kale out of the way and pushing herself toward a console that could stabilize the energy fields, keeping the station from completely collapsing. Sparks flew, smoke filled the air, and the sound of twisting metal echoed through the corridors. "Almost there!" Mara shouted, her hands flying across the controls. Kale helped reroute power, while Rin held a beam to illuminate the console. With one final push, the energy stabilizers hummed and the structure quieted, but only temporarily. Mara felt her muscles ache from the effort, but she smiled faintly. They had succeeded, and the station contained a cache of supplies. Back on the transport ship, Sarai and Lyric were overjoyed at the discovery. Medical kits, nutrient packs, and water purification devices meant they could recover fully. Mara allowed herself a moment to rest, watching them eat and drink, the first real peace they had known in weeks. But even in moments of calm, Mara knew they could not stay in one place for long. The galaxy was vast, but so were the dangers. Corporate forces would never stop hunting, and pirates might appear where least expected. Mara began planning the next leg of their journey, a path toward the Sanctuary Fleet, a coalition of neutral worlds known for protecting refugees and runaway slaves. During this planning, Sarai began to show signs of strength and resilience. She helped Lyric understand the ship's safety protocols and even assisted Mara's crew with small repairs. It was a slow transformation, but Mara saw the woman reclaiming a part of herself that had been lost to fear and abandonment. Lyric, too, was changing. He laughed softly at small things, asked questions, and began to trust humans fully. Mara felt a deep sense of satisfaction, but also a renewed sense of responsibility. The universe could be cruel, but she had chosen to be a force for good. And with Sarai and Lyric under her protection, she had the chance to prove that humanity's compassion could not be measured by rules, politics, or fear. It was defined by actions. As they continued their journey, the crew remained vigilant, teaching the woman and child about life aboard the ship, navigation basics, and even simple self-defense in case of emergencies. Each day was a small victory, a moment of growth, trust, and courage. Mara marveled at how quickly Sarai adapted, how Lyric's fear turned into curiosity, and how the bond between humans and Yalithians grew stronger. But Mara also knew that the hardest challenges were still ahead. The galaxy was unpredictable, and no amount of skill or compassion could remove every danger. Pirates, rival factions, and corporate enforcers would test their resolve at every turn. Yet she also knew that together they could face anything. Humanity's greatest strength was not in weapons or technology. It was in courage, in empathy, in the stubborn will to protect those who could not protect themselves. As the ship sailed into the star-studded void, Mara looked at Sarai and Lyric, their small forms illuminated by the soft glow of the ship's lights. She smiled, a quiet determination in her heart. The journey was far from over, but they had survived the first waves of danger. And in surviving, they had shown that even in a galaxy of indifference, compassion could shine. Mara whispered to herself, almost like a promise, "We'll get you to safety, no matter what. The galaxy will see that humanity does not turn away." And with that, the ship continued its course, moving steadily toward hope, toward sanctuary, and toward a future where even the most abandoned and helpless could find protection, care, and a chance to live. The stars stretched endlessly before the transport ship, vast and cold, yet filled with light that flickered like distant promises. Mara steered steadily toward the coordinates of the sanctuary fleet, a coalition of neutral worlds dedicated to protecting refugees, runaway slaves, and those abandoned by the galaxy. For Sarai and Lyric, the journey had been long, terrifying, and exhausting. For Mara, it had been a test of courage, ingenuity, and patience, pushing the limits of human determination. "Are we there yet?" Lyric asked, his small voice filled with curiosity despite his exhaustion. He sat beside his mother, who held him gently, her hands trembling slightly, but strong enough to keep him safe. "Almost," Mara replied, a gentle smile crossing her face. "Soon you'll be safe. No one will be able to hurt you here." Sarai leaned back against the wall, taking a deep breath. Her body still felt weak, but her spirit had grown stronger with every day of travel. I never imagined a place like this existed. A place where we could be safe," she said softly, eyes wide with wonder. "And I never imagined humans could care this much." Mara shook her head. "It's not just humans. It's people who choose to act when others do not. But yes, humans do have a stubborn streak of compassion." The mood was hopeful, but Mara's instincts warned her not to relax too soon. The galaxy was unpredictable. Pirates, corporate enforcers, and other factions could appear without warning. Every sensor ping was checked, every movement scrutinized. Her crew had become a well-oiled team, each member fully aware of the stakes and determined to protect the two Yalithians at all costs. As the ship approached the edge of sanctuary space, the massive fleet became visible. Ships of all shapes and sizes floated in orderly formations, some bristling with defensive technology, others more utilitarian in appearance. Mara felt a surge of relief. This was the place where Sarai and Lyric would finally find protection. However, they were not alone. A group of corporate enforcer ships appeared on the edge of the fleet's sensor range, attempting one last interception. Mara's hands tightened on the controls. "They won't reach us," she said firmly. "We've come too far for that." The crew prepared the ship for evasive action, but the sanctuary fleet responded faster than Mara expected. Defense drones and patrol ships moved to intercept the corporate vessels, forming a protective barrier around Mara's transport. Lasers streaked across space, bright against the darkness, and the corporate ships were forced to retreat under heavy pressure. Mara let herself relax slightly, knowing that for now, Sarai and Lyric were safe. The transport ship docked with one of the larger sanctuary vessels, a sprawling ship that acted as a hub for arrivals and aid. Mara led Sarai and Lyric into the docking bay, their small forms dwarfed by the massive interior. Other refugees, humans, aliens of countless species, and former slaves, looked at them with curiosity and welcome. The sight was overwhelming, but for Sarai, it was like stepping into a dream.
"You're safe now," Mara said, her voice soft but firm. "This is a place where no one can take you without your consent."
"You can heal here." Sarai knelt and held Lyric close. "Thank you for everything. You risked so much for us. I can't even imagine why." Mara crouched beside her, placing a hand on Sarai's shoulder. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because your life matters. Because someone had to act when everyone else refused. That's what humans do. They stand up when others turn away." Lyric looked at Mara, wide-eyed. I want to help people too. like you already have. By surviving, by trusting and learning. That's the first step. Over the next days, Sarai and Lyric began to adjust to life within the sanctuary fleet. Medical teams helped Sarai regain strength, while Lyric explored the safe zones under supervision. Mara's crew assisted with their integration, teaching them about routines, safety protocols, and basic self-defense in case they ever left the protected areas. As Sarai grew stronger, she began helping others. She shared her knowledge of work she had done as a laborer, teaching young aliens and humans alike how to manage resources, operate machinery, and problem-solve in ways that could make life easier within the fleet. Lyric, meanwhile, showed a natural curiosity for technology, eagerly asking questions and learning from Mara's crew. Mara observed them quietly one evening, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had been dangerous, terrifying, and uncertain, but seeing Sarai reclaim her strength and confidence reminded her why she had chosen to act. Humanity's greatest power was not just in fighting, surviving, or exploring. It was in empathy, courage, and the willingness to protect those who could not protect themselves. Word of Mara's rescue mission began to spread through the sanctuary fleet. Other humans and alien refugees learned how a small team had defied corporate greed and indifference to save 2 helpless lives. The story inspired discussions about compassion, ethics, and the role of individuals in shaping the galaxy. Small acts of courage began to ripple outward, creating hope in pockets that had once been filled with despair. One day, as Mara walked through the docking bay with Sarai and Lyric, they witnessed a group of young aliens helping a new refugee family. The parents were too weak to stand, and the children clung to them, trembling. Sarai paused, kneeling beside the smallest child. You're safe now," she whispered, echoing the words Mara had said to her. The child's eyes brightened, and the mother smiled through tears. Mara felt her chest swell with pride. This was why they had risked everything. This was why humanity mattered in the galaxy. Not because of ships, weapons, or technology, but because they acted when others would not. They made the difference that could change lives, inspire hope, and perhaps, over time, reshape the universe. Months passed, and Sarai and Lyric grew stronger and more confident. Sarai even became part of a small council advising newcomers on adaptation and safety. Lyric learned to navigate safely within the fleet, and his laughter became a common sound that lifted the spirits of those around him. Mara visited them often, checking their progress, sharing stories of her travels, and reminding them that courage and compassion were gifts that could be passed on. As Mara prepared to leave for another mission, she stood with Sarai and Lyric near the viewport of the sanctuary vessel. The stars outside shimmered like diamonds, endless and full of possibilities. "You've come so far," Mara said gently. "Look at how strong you both are. You survived what no one else would survive. You have a future now." Sarai held Lyric's hand tightly. "And it's thanks to you, humans. You saved us when no one else would. I will never forget that." Lyric smiled up at Mara. "I want to be like you, brave and kind." Mara chuckled softly. You already are. You already are." As she prepared to depart, Mara reflected on the journey. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and often indifferent, but it was not without hope. Humanity's courage, ingenuity, and compassion could light the darkest corners. They could protect the helpless, inspire the weak, and challenge the cruel. Mara had witnessed it firsthand, and now she carried that knowledge forward, knowing that even small acts of courage could change lives. Sarai and Lyric watched as the transport ship lifted from the docking bay, disappearing into the stars. For the first time, they felt truly free, unafraid of abandonment, and safe in a world that had once ignored them. They had survived, healed, and grown because someone had chosen to act when others refused. And Mara, looking back one last time through the viewport, smiled. She knew that the galaxy was still filled with dangers, but she also knew that humanity's light could reach far, inspiring courage and compassion wherever it went. The spark that had begun with a single choice on Krylos, 7 now burned brightly, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the universe, hope could thrive. In the vast, infinite expanse of space, Sarai and Lyric's story became more than survival. It became a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and humanity's ability to stand when the rest of the galaxy turned away. And somewhere in the distance, Mara continued her journey, carrying the same determination into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next, always guided by the principle that no life was too small, too weak, or too abandoned to be worth saving.